Hello and welcome to this fast chat with Data IQ. My name is Max Smolaks, editor at AI Business, an online publication dedicated to artificial intelligence. And today I'm talking to Kurt Mermel, who's Chief Customer Officer at Data IQ. Welcome, Kurt.
Hi, Max. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, yeah, and we should have quite an interesting conversation. Let me just set the scene. While a lot of excitement and attention is rightfully given to cutting-edge research in AI, there's a much quieter but potentially much more impactful revolution going on in the background, the rise of everyday AI. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And my first question would be, what do you believe innovation in AI looks like going forward? So obviously there has been a lot of advances on the infrastructure side, on the software side, but we're at the stage where, these products are coming out of the lab and going into enterprise IT. So what do you think about innovation today?
Sure. Well, excellent question, right? I think it's a question that's on a lot of our minds is, what's coming next? And so I think, on the one hand, the innovation that we see, let's say on the analytical or algorithmic side, the progress in, deep learning, other fundamental analytical techniques, I think that that's going to continue, as is, of course, the progress on the, let's say, data storage and compute side of it, more elastic options, more scalable options, as we've seen with the rise of, perhaps initially Spark, now Kubernetes, and certainly future technologies as well. But I think that the true innovation is going to be the way in which those different technologies are combined and applied in the broadest possible way. I think the innovation there is maybe actually the scale and the passage from, let's say, a lab type environment, or maybe like a very hardcore engineered environment, out into the hands of many others. Now, that doesn't mean that those most advanced individuals are going to go away. Their contributions are perhaps more important than ever, but they're going to be able to leverage this much greater population of contributors to AI, which ultimately is going to see more AI be produced, and using that term broadly, right, to talk about a lot of different predictive technologies, a lot of more automated decision making throughout organizations and society as a whole. So I think really that true innovation, while it's going to certainly progress, at every layer of the technological stack, really the real innovation is the way it's going to become more and more deeply embedded in so much of what we do at work, at home, and really as a society. So for me, the big innovation that we see coming is, that advent of everyday AI, where AI is no longer, a mystical technology that we only see either in movies or in R&D lab, of course, but really something which is embedded throughout through a lot of our lives.
And if you're going to approach AI this way, like as everyday AI, as discrete AI, you probably need to start drawing up your strategy right now. So what would you be your advice to business leaders who are starting to think about these subjects? Like how do you bring AI into everyday in your organization?
Sure, absolutely. I think that's perhaps the key question, because you need to be thinking about it today. Certainly, the competition probably is, and it's one of those technologies where there are really compounding returns on it, and so any sort of delay early on in that process, it risks to have massive differences in the ROI, the value that you realize 2, 3, 5, 10 years from now. So indeed, there is some urgency around it. Always right. We typically would take a people, process, technology look at it. On the technology side, yes, it's about proper, scalable, elastic technologies, while recognizing, right, that the, let's say, legacy on-premise technology is probably not going anywhere either, but more of a strategy around managing a transition rather than, unplugging or switching off and switching on some set of technologies. I think really, though, it's on the process and people side that there needs to be a lot of planning early on. In some ways, not to minimize the effort that goes into a cloud migration. It's massive. Rightly, there's a lot of professionals that focus their careers on that, but really, changing the way that an organization operates and the way that people conduct their work, that's a really significant change and is sometimes underestimated. So we would really recommend that they start looking at their operating model. Our recommendation is really to create a center for acceleration of these processes, to own a lot of the core technology, especially some of the enabling technology, something that's more at a, let's say a software user-facing level of the stack. But then also the enablement strategy around that, the prioritization of use cases. What are we going to do? How is that? How is the value from those different applications going to be quantified and understood, to make sure that all those elements are in place, so that ultimately, right, when you need to report up to your C-suite, out to the board, that you can explain not only do we have the technology in place, but we have everything else that's going to be needed to leverage that technology, to measure the outcome, and to prove that this was a good and valuable approach. And you're absolutely right. It's, today is the day to start if you haven't already.
And in your work, have you seen anybody being particularly successful in this approach? So how how do successful organizations practice everyday AI?
Oh, sure. There's some that have been working at it for nearly a decade now, and some that we've been working with for almost that long as well. I'm thinking about customers like GE Aviation, other customers that we have within within the financial services or even the pharmaceutical sector. And these are sectors, industries that have a lot of regulatory requirements. Be it banking, jet engines, right? You have to make those well, or pharmaceuticals. Obviously, there's a lot of attention to doing it right, and even in those highly regulated industries with real consequences to the decisions that are being made, they've done a great job of building out platforms, building out processes, and building out their organization to be able to do that. Now, what does it look like? Is it the best deep learning model running out on the edge or on some massive GPU cluster? Maybe, maybe there's an application that requires that. But really the transformative potential is the way in which so many thousands of people within these organizations have been enabled on this technology, are able to use it every day. Now, again, the way that they use it is going to be different, and the way that a data scientist is going to interact with it is going to be different than the way that an analyst is going to interact with it. Frequently, right, the data scientist is going to be building some sort of model or other asset that then can be reused, perhaps adapted, reapplied by the analyst. But working together, they have started to see this transformative potential, which is really getting these technologies, again, the combination of, the core data technologies, but also the machine learning, or call them AI technologies, the algorithmic layer running on top of the core technologies, really see that getting built out and deployed on top of core systems, business systems. And that's, again, where that potential starts to become apparent. When you realize that you can do it to, you can augment 2-5% of your business processes, well, there's no reason, presumably, that many more can't be augmented as well. And again, it's not about automating the entire organization, but rather augmenting so many different processes, so many different decisions, that the influence of AI has this massive uplift on even these very large organizations.
That makes a lot of sense. So you need tools that kind of that serve basically two very different categories of people right at the same time. So I guess that's the challenge.
Well, indeed, it's a challenge, but we think it's also a necessity, right? You need to build, you need to allow those individuals with perhaps the most advanced skills to work out at the edge of the envelope, out on the cutting edge. Otherwise, right, they're constrained, and you're probably missing some opportunities. But yes, you also need to enable kind of the much larger population of individuals who have perhaps great domain knowledge, great understanding of the broader context. And by bringing them together, that's where that biggest or the greatest potential is to be realized. And so it's not an either or question. It's really a both and sort of situation where, yes, you need to serve both populations, serve them well, and most importantly, bring them together. I think we're past the age of silos, people silos, right? It used to be all about breaking down the data silos. Let's break down those people silos as well. And from our experience, when an organization succeeds in doing that, that's really where the potential is getting unleashed.
And this is a question that interests me personally. So I think in the early days of AI, everybody was hunting for new use cases. Everybody was discovering use cases. Oh my God, I can't believe AI can do this and AI can do that. But we've arrived at the stage where there are thousands of use cases. So how can organizations navigate these thousands of use cases on offer and choose the ones that actually are probably in first priority for them? AI can be applied across any industry. We know that now. So, and especially when you're talking about everyday AI. So where do you start?
Exactly right. So if you're talking about potentially thousands of applications in a given organization, tens of thousands, and potentially in a large organization, absolutely the question is about prioritization. Where do you start, and then how do you scale it out? And really, for us, that's a question of governance, but not data governance. Here we're talking about AI governance, which is something much broader than just purely who has access to what data. Obviously, that's part of it. In regulated industries, an extremely important part of it. However, what you need to be able to do is look at the collection, kind of the realm of what is possible, and then start looking at it across a couple of dimensions. The two most important of which are going to be technical feasibility, and then of course potential value, potential business value that can be realized from it. And so if you have high value, easy to do use cases, obviously put those at the top of the list. But then the question of course becomes harder, and then that really truly becomes just a core management question for that organization. In the same way of where should we allocate our scarce resources? Well, we're going to have to make those decisions. We have to do it intelligently. So the question then becomes, how do you enable those decisions to be made the proper way? And that's where we see a lot, or actually a really strong and bright future for let's call it the governance layer on top of AI. That's an area that personally at Dataiku we're investing in heavily to be able to support, because we see that that's the next big step. Is not so much proving that it's possible, not so much getting it out into production in a few cases, but really prioritizing and then managing the workflow of potentially tens of thousands of use cases as they go through that filter of ideation, validation, initial development, quality control, user acceptability testing, deployment into production, and then of course, right, it's called the MLOps side of things, the actual management of those models when they're actually out there and running. But it's not just that development to MLOps, management and production that you need to look at. You really need to look at the entire picture, including that ideation prioritization phase as well.
And one of the things that people, like AI used to be a buzzword. I hope it's not anymore, but they're kind of like AI has given life to a bunch of other buzzwords. And one of them is AutoML, or automatic machine learning. And this seems to mean very different things to many different people. And, like I heard various explanations. And I know this is something that Dataiku is engaged in as well. So what does AutoML mean for you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think AutoML, we've heard the term for going on a decade now, right? And a lot of organizations have really gone all in. I think in some cases there's a misconception that it's a magic box, an answer machine. You turn it on, you sit anyone in front of it, you hit the button that says predict, and you get predictions out of it. And I think that's that's just incorrect. For us, what it is let's say an accelerator for either a data scientist or of course somebody who may not have quite those skills, but who understands the domain. And specifically for Dataiku, then what it is a process by which you can kind of set up your experiments, set up the tests that you want to run, test different options in parallel, and then of course depending on your, let's say, skill level or expertise, go in and tweak different parameters, or of course just let the program, let the machine take its best guess at what's probably going to get reasonable results. Now, what it's not, right, is necessarily something that's going to build a production-ready model and say, hey, do you want to push this out into production? We truly believe in a human-in-the-loop process here, especially for things that are going to go out and impact the world and potentially influence decisions, which are going to influence other human beings, right? We need to make sure that there is that human in the loop looking out after that. But what it is potentially a huge efficiency gain, a huge time saver. And what we've seen, reported from our customers that, there can be, 70, 80, 90% reduction in the time that it takes to, figure out what you want to do, go in a direction, and then start, really investing your time in building the model that really truly is going to be the one that you want to put into production. So it's a really important feature. But for us, it's part of that bigger picture of accelerating the work of people from different backgrounds, getting them to come together, perhaps doing some of the grunt work for them, but ensuring really that the human is still there at the control panel and saying, yes, that's the one, that's the way that we want these, for example, these decisions to be automated. We've approved that that's the way that it should be done. Go ahead and put that out into production.
So AutoML doesn't mean the absence of humans, right?
Absolutely not. No, no more than automated transmission in your car means that that you don't need to be behind the driver wheel. Now, autonomous, that could be something different, but that's not what we're talking about. And again, I think especially on the ML frontier, we want to make sure that there's always a human in that loop.
Okay, that makes absolute sense, and it's definitely like an approach that can make people sleep soundly at night. So thank you for that. Well, Kurt Mummel, Chief Customer Officer at Dataiku. And if this sounds interesting, I believe there should be some marketing materials and media materials, white papers that you can peruse. So good luck on your work, and hopefully see you again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Max. I enjoyed it.